pioneer must traverse across bumpy and dangerous terrain so they can pave over it and leave a smoother path for all those that follow. They must break down barriers and knock down walls so they can rebuild a more welcoming community. And in the 80s and 90s there was one African striker who did just that, blazing a trail across Europe and flying the flag of his country to the benefit of the generation who retraced his footsteps. Growing up in the rough Krofrom district of Kumasi, a city in southern Ghana, Anthony Yeboah never imagined that he could be a professional footballer. One of 9 children, it was his job to make the long walk to fetch water for the family before embarking on the 3-kilometer trek to his school. Yeboah's father worked hard to provide for his family, but one salary was rarely enough for so many people, and Tony often got angry when his dad would fail to pay his school fees on time, before he got older and realised that the man had just been trying his best to cope. Yeboah worried about his poor academic performance, but was drawn instead to football from a young age. He would sit in class daydreaming about playing, and sometimes the urge to go and kick the ball would be so strong that he would lie to his teacher about being sick in order to be excused from school, only to go and play football with his mates. Even the beatings he received when he was caught did not deter him. That did not stop me, because when I loved something, it did not matter what you did to me, he would later say. His passion and obvious talent for football won him a scholarship to a prodigious middle school in Kumasi. At the age of 12, he joined the Kotoko Babies, the name given to the Ashanti Kotoko youth team. Yeboah's life began to revolve around football, and he would often come home late from school or spend several days away from home staying with his manager without permission. His parents wanted him to continue his education and strongly disapproved of his decision to pursue a career in football. No one from Ghana had ever really been successful in doing so at that time, and they believed their son was destined for failure going down this path. So vehemently were they against his choice that one time they even phoned the police and had Yeboah's manager, Peter Nami, arrested for kidnapping. He spent a night in jail before being bailed out by the sports authorities. However, nothing could break Yeboah's will to succeed. Inspired by hero of African football Roger Milla, as well as by watching John Barnes tear it up for Liverpool on his television every weekend, Yeboah threw himself into training at Asante. However, he soon became frustrated. Every year they would select 3 players to promote to the senior squad, and every year they overlooked young Anthony Yeboah. So he left and joined 3rd Division side OSA. After a year with them, he moved to Neoplan Stars, a Division 2 side. He was legally still too young to play for their senior team, so through some dodgy methods, his date of birth was moved back 2 years to 1964 on official documents. This is something which later caused confusion when he came to Europe. Helping his team get promoted to the top flight, he gained a reputation as an aggressive forward and scorer of great goals. Next, he joined Kumasi Cornerstones, a Premier League side, where he developed into a prolific striker and was the league's top scorer for 2 of his 3 seasons there. Now established as one of the country's hottest properties, he had many options and eventually chose to sign for Okwawu United, a club based in Nkoko in the east of Ghana. Here, he continued to bang in the goals, bagging over 40 across 2 seasons at the rate of 1 a game if records online are to be believed. Now 22 and with offers to play in clubs all across the continent, Tony Yeboah had a decision to make. After much deliberation, he had made up his mind to go to the Ivory Coast. However, a German man by the name of Harald Duberquet intervened to change the course of history. Duberquet, who was working with the Ghanaian Boxing Federation at the time, had seen Yeboah play and told him he could set him up with some opportunities in Germany. As Duberquet, by his own admission, knew little about football, he enlisted the help of agent Joachim Lükel, and so Tony Yeboah flew over to Germany seeking footballing glory. It being his first time in Europe and away from his homeland, Yeboah was rather nervous. Yeboah's team advised him to shoot for the stars and attempt to win a contract with a Bundesliga side, so trials were organised with clubs like Bochum, Leverkusen and Dortmund. In the freezing cold German winter, Yeboah failed to impress sufficiently, and no one took a chance on him. Dortmund coach Reinhard Saftig saw the potential in the forward, but was in the midst of a tough season and could not focus his energies on developing a raw youngster. Giving up was not an option for Yeboah, so he tried his luck in the 2nd Division and in 1988 signed a deal with Saarbrücken. But of course, the hard work had only just begun and Yeboah faced a real struggle adapting to his new surroundings. It was a total culture shock. Weather, food, language, everything was completely different. This was a challenging enough situation to deal with, but Yeboah was also subjected to vile racist abuse from so-called fans of rival teams who would call him names so disgusting I can't even say them, make monkey noises and even throw bananas at him.
Can you imagine every game when you go, the fans are shouting out, you know? So The beginning wasn't easy, but when it comes, you have to accept it. Nothing you can do. What you have to have in your mind is that end of the day you come back home, and it's very difficult to stop it.
At least when he first arrived, he had the support of his manager Werner Fuchs, with whom he got on well. However, in October, Fuchs was sacked and replaced by Klaus Schlappner, who was a whole different kettle of fish. Yeboah straight away noticed the difference in tone when Schlappner spoke to him and could feel that the new coach did not like him. That makes sense when you learn a little bit more about Mr. Schlappner. When speaking about Yeboah, he refused to use his name and referred to him only as my Black Forest man. He also gave his opinion about black footballers to the press, saying the black man is undisciplined, can't stand the winter and has malaria. It was bad enough that Yeboah had to put up with such nonsense from the stands, let alone from within his own club. Luckily, his teammate, the midfielder Eugen Hatch, spoke English, helped Yeboah with many things, and the two quickly became good friends. As a striker, Yeboah also relied on Hatch for good service from the midfield. After a rocky start, Yeboah finally started to feel settled and came into great form in the final third of the season, scoring 7 in the last 14 matches, bringing his tally up to 9 in the league for the season. These goals helped Saarbrücken to finish third and qualify for the Bundesliga playoffs for a chance of promotion. Their opponents were 16th place Bundesliga side Eintracht Frankfurt, who were playing for their survival in Germany's top flight. Saarbrücken lost the first leg 2-0. In the home fixture, Tony Yeboah tore the defence of Dietmar Roth and Karl-Heinz Korbel to shreds, scoring 2 brilliantly instinctive goals. Unfortunately for Saarbrücken, Franz Schulz scored a 50th minute free kick and Frankfurt won 3-2 on aggregate, meaning Saarbrücken stayed where they were in the second division. Eintracht, however, had naturally been very impressed with Yeboah, and they kept tabs on him across the 88-89 season, and so they would have watched him wreak havoc on the league, leaving a trail of destroyed defences in his wake, scoring 17 goals and once more helping his team to finish third. And again, they were unfortunately beaten in the playoffs, this time by Bochum 2-1, although Yeboah did score again. Frankfurt had seen enough and decided that now was the time to strike and get their man. They snapped up Tony Yeboah for a fee of €600,000. Yeboah was the first black player ever to play for Frankfurt, and just like at Saarbrücken, he had to deal with some horrid racial abuse, but this time some of it was also coming from his own fans. There was also some less overt but just as insidious discrimination from journalists. In a now infamous exchange, one reporter asked, "You often talk about performance, drive a BMW, live in a terrace house with a wall unit and a front garden. Are you aware that you seem like a model German citizen?" Tony's response to the obvious surprise that a black player should be living such an exemplary life is now legendary. "Should I light a campfire in the living room?" he responded. On the pitch, Yeboah endured something of a slow start with the Eagles, just as he had done at Saarbrücken. He scored 8 and assisted 6 in the Bundesliga in his first campaign. Definitely a solid start to life at the German top flight, but nothing compared to what was about to come. Under the direction of new manager Dragoslav Stepanovic, Eintracht Frankfurt played some of the best football in the Bundesliga throughout the 91-92 campaign, and after a slow start in his first 5 games while he recovered from injury, Tony Yeboah emerged as one of the most consistent and dangerous forwards in the league. He profited heavily from the creative midfield duo of Andreas Möller and Uwe Bein, who together assisted the majority of his goals that season. Pacey, powerful and in possession of a nice first touch, Yeboah was utterly deadly at finishing off quick counter-attacks. He could also start off the breakaway, collecting the ball deep before charging up the pitch and using his unpredictable dribbling skills to stride past defenders, leaving them chasing his dust. Sometimes he would decide to take on entire teams by himself, sending opponents tumbling like skittles with the sheer force of his will before unleashing a shot. And on the subject of his finishing, he had one of the fiercest strikes I have ever seen. With a very short back lift, he could generate tremendous power. The phrase "nearly took the net clean off" was made for this man. Despite being rather one-footed when it came to dribbling, almost exclusively controlling the ball with his left, when it came to shooting, he was equally good with both feet. Although not a giant by any means, he had a great leap, and this combined with his clever movement in the box made him a potent aerial threat, and he scored many headers for Frankfurt. It wasn't only scoring, he proved himself to be a reliable provider of goals for his team. Using his strength to hold up the ball and hold off defenders, he could use his decent range of passing to bring teammates into play. Often labelled as a lazy trainer by coaches throughout his career, you wouldn't dream of using that word to describe Yeboah after watching his matches. Determined and committed, his incredible engine and work rate meant that he would go all game trying to make something happen. One German newspaper described his intoxicating blend of technique and physicality as a cross between Pele and Carl Lewis. In the first half of the season, Yeboah scored 9 and assisted 3, helping his team to shoot up to the summit of the table. When the Bundesliga broke up for the winter break in the middle of December, Anthony Tony Yeboah joined up with the Ghana national team for the Africa Cup of Nations, after a few weeks of rest of course. Yeboah had actually been invited to join the Black Stars at the age of 18 while at Kumasi Cornerstones, but due to competition from players like Abdul Razak, it took him a couple of years to make his debut. During this time, Yeboah would do anything he could to curry favour with the first team, washing their strips and polishing their boots for them. His extracurricular efforts paid off, and after impressing in his debut as a sub, he never looked back and became a mainstay in the team. The 1992 AFCON in Senegal was his first appearance at the competition, and he carried his great club form onto the international stage. He bagged the only goal against Egypt to send the Black Stars through to the quarters, where he opened the scoring against Congo, an opportunistic daisy cutter as he pounced on a loose ball after great work from Lamptey. In the second half, Congo scored a dramatic equaliser against the run of play. A few minutes later, Yeboah played in Abedi Pele, who decided to take on the whole Congo defence and score a scintillating winner.
Now, can he take on the entire Congo defence? He can! Oh, what a brilliant goal by Pele! The goal of the tournament!
They then edged a close semi-final against Nigeria 2-1, with both goals coming from corners. However, their passage through to the final had come at a devastating cost. Just before half-time, Abedi Pele picked up a needless yellow card for what I can only assume was for saying something distasteful to the referee, as it was actually James Kwesi Appiah who had just given away a free kick for a clumsy challenge. This meant that Pele was suspended for the showpiece against the Ivory Coast. Not only had Ghana lost their most influential player, their creative fulcrum and the man around whom the team was built, but they had lost their captain. Tony Yeboah was the vice-captain, so naturally assumed that he would wear the armband and lead his country in the final. However, hours before kick-off, manager Otto Pfister was handed a letter from the Ghana FA stating that the German-born defender Anthony Bafo was to be named captain. Shock rippled through the team that Bafo, who had been in the national team just a year, was to oust the rightful choice Yeboah as the captain. This unexpected saga affected the team, none more so than the angry Yeboah. With the issue weighing heavily on his mind, he could not find a way through for the dominant Black Stars despite his best efforts. The game went to penalties, and a nail-biting marathon of a shootout ended 11-10 for the Ivory Coast, with the controversial captain Tony Bafo missing the decisive spot kick.
This situation also costed the team a lot because everybody was shocked. You can see affected the team. It definitely was in my mind. I was a little bit angry.
Returning back to Frankfurt and having to dust himself down from that bitter disappointment, Yeboah played his part in one of the most exciting Bundesliga seasons in recent memory. With Bayern Munich imploding that year, Frankfurt, Dortmund and Stuttgart were battling it out for glory, backed up by the dazzling dribbling of JJ Okocha, who had arrived as a free transfer in the winter window. In the last 15 matches, Yeboah scored 6 and assisted 4 as the title race went down to the wire on the final day, with the top 3 all sitting on 50 points, but with Frankfurt having a far superior goal difference, all they had to do to ensure they won their first league title in over 30 years was to win their final game. The fixture list had been extremely kind to them, as their opponents were Hansa Rostock, a team already relegated and one that Frankfurt had beaten earlier in the season 2-0, with Yeboah scoring and assisting in that game. Not one of the thousands of Frankfurt fans that descended on Rostock would have bet against their team bringing the title home that day. However, what played out has to go down as one of the biggest robberies in football history. However, Rostock weren't just going to lie down. They gave Frankfurt a couple of early scares in the first half before Uwe Bein started to control the game and spray some nice passes about. After a goalless first half, Frankfurt ramped up the pressure, with Yeboah coming close. Then a devastating blow was struck as Rostock exposed Frankfurt on the counter to take a shock lead. It was a lead that lasted all of 2 minutes as Axel Kruse restored parity, pursuing the goal that would make them champions. The best chances again fell to Tony Yeboah, but he simply could not make the net bulge for the 16th and most vital time that season. And then came the opportunity. Yeboah knocked the ball into the path of Rav Weber, 5 metres from goal. Just as he was about to pull the trigger, he was cynically chopped down from behind. It was the most blatant penalty you were ever likely to see. The stoniest of stone wallers. Everybody in the stadium could see it was a pen. Everyone, that is, except for the ref, who waved away the protests. Not long later, there was jubilation as Frankfurt finally had the ball in the back of the net, but the joy was short-lived as it was chalked off for handball, much to the fury of the Eintracht players, who saw another debatable call go against them. The final sign that destiny was not on their side came when Edgar Schmidt hit the post. As Frankfurt threw everyone forward in a desperate attempt to score, they were hit on the break, and Rostock won 2-1, pouring salt in the wound on what was one of the most painful days of Frankfurt's history. Over the next 2 seasons, Anthony Yeboah cemented his place as the best striker in Germany. He was top scorer in the league 2 years in a row, becoming the first African ever to do so. He also became the first African to captain a German team, as he was made skipper of Eintracht Frankfurt. During that time, Frankfurt never finished outside the top 5. It was a far cry from his first season at Frankfurt, when he had been abused by his own fans, but he had won them over with a barrage of goals, and he now even had his own fan club, named Yeboah's Witnesses. All was going well for Tony Yeboah until the 94-95 season when Jupp Heynckes took the reins as manager. Heynckes did not want the Ghanaian goal machine to continue as captain, and told the team that they would have to vote for a new one. They all backed up their skipper though, and informed Heynckes that they wanted Yeboah to continue wearing the armband. Clearly this rubbed Heynckes up the wrong way, and despite scoring 7 in 14 at the start of the season, he found himself ousted from the team, along with JJ Okocha and Maurizio Galdino. In an interview much later, Heynckes explained his reasoning for suspending the trio. The 3 of them didn't feel like training, and they balked at taking a run through the woods. If I let professional football players get away with something like that, then it's game over for me as a coach. Yeboah, however, has a different interpretation of events.
It's always a racism, and he knew that what he's doing. Why me or JJ or Godino? Three foreigners in the team.
Whatever the reason, Bayern Munich looked to take advantage of the situation. President Franz Beckenbauer was extremely keen on bringing Yeboah to Bayern, and during the winter break invited him to Munich for talks. The meeting was apparently extremely positive, as Yeboah agreed personal terms, and it was all but a done deal for him to join Bayern Munich after his holiday. The Frankfurt board and the fans were up in arms, and they were adamant that if Tony Yeboah was to leave, it would be for any team but Bayern. Meanwhile in England, Leeds United had been linked with more or less every available striker since that summer, and manager Howard Wilkinson knew all about Tony Yeboah, having watched him several times on satellite telly, and was very keen on bringing him in. Leeds were having a disappointingly average season, and were sitting 8th in the table. Their main problem was finding the back of the net on a regular basis, and they had one of the lowest goal tallies in the league. When Leeds secretary Nigel Pleasance was made aware of Yeboah's availability through his contacts, he moved quickly to fly Tony and his advisors over to England. After 36 hours of tense talks, lengthened by the language barrier, Leeds put an attractive offer on the table, including a $200k enticement fee to lure him away from Bayern Munich. After a couple of painstaking days, Pleasance got the call to come over to Frankfurt, and pen was put to paper on an initial 6-month loan deal. The headache wasn't quite over yet, as Leeds then had to deal with many frustrating institutions to rush a work permit through for a 29-year-old Tony Yeboah in record quick time. And on the 5th of January 1995, the African superstar was unveiled as a Leeds United player. The main concerns about Yeboah was his fitness, as due to the winter break, it had been almost 2 months since he had played football. Yeboah assessed himself as being about 70% fit. Also, there was a question over how he would adapt to the style of football in England.
English football is more aggressive, more aggressive, and excitement in the game is very high, and it's a very quick game, so you have to always react very fast. And the Bundesliga, sometimes they slow the game down and process the ball a lot. But here it's not 90 minutes. You have to work hard, especially the striker. You don't have any rest.
As such, he was eased into the team. On the 24th of January, an excited Ellen Road got their first look of their new star, who was named on the bench for the game against QPR. Replacing 2-goal hero Philemon Masinga to warm applause, Yeboah showed some flashes of what he was all about in a 6-minute run-out. 3 weeks later, and he scored his first goal for Leeds, coming off the bench to bag a consolation tap-in a 3-1 FA Cup 5th round loss to Man United. The very next game, and he scored again in his first start for the club, an instinctive snapshot, turning and pouncing on a loose ball in the box. From that point on, the goals just kept flowing, and the new Leeds hero ended up with 12 in just 18 end-of-season appearances. This tally included consecutive doubles against Chelsea and Leicester respectively.
Yeboah in the centre, great skill from Wallace. Gets around the defender, still going. There's Yeboah! McAllister, Wallace again, wrong side of the Leicester defence, forcing Poole into an excellent save, and Yeboah's there again!
A brilliant hat-trick against Ipswich.
Yeboah started his run, lovely ball from McAllister, Here he is, draws the goalkeeper, beautiful footwork. Way to go again. Yeboah taking charge, he wants to score. Well, here's Yeboah. Good first touch, even better second touch. That's the hat-trick.
And the brace against Crystal Palace on the penultimate day of the season.
Palace can't keep a hold of Yeboah. And he punishes them. Wallace takes it off. Now to Yeboah. Yet another goal for Tony Yeboah.
It was a blistering start to life in the Prem, and Yeboah's arrival and goals helped Leeds to finish 5th in the league and qualify for the UEFA Cup.
Yeboah's arrival and him managing to score the goals, it's just lifted everybody.
He's a great striker and he scores great goals. And it gives everyone confidence.
So big was the impression that Yeboah had made on the league, the Manchester United gaffer Alex Ferguson looked to take advantage of the tempered nature of his situation at Leeds. Yeboah, however, had been bowled over by the Leeds fans, and his family, including his young daughter, were settled there. And after weeks of anxiety amongst the Leeds faithful, the £3.5 million signing of Tony Yeboah on a 3-year deal was finally announced before the team went on a pre-season tour of South Africa.
I know English football is harder than German, so I already know the pre-season training will be gonna very tough, and I hope this is the first game. I hope we can enjoy ourselves.
And Tony Yeboah certainly enjoyed himself in the first match of the 95-96 Premier League season, scoring 2 goals in a 2-1 win over West Ham, which gave him great confidence for the year ahead, and he carried that self-belief into the very next game against the team that he had supported growing up, Liverpool. Seeing his idols John Barnes and Ian Rush lining up next to him in the tunnel gave him the feeling that he would have to do something special to prove that he deserved to share the pitch with them. But special does not even begin to cover what Yeboah produced. It was one of those close games where you knew it would be settled by either a moment of magic or a mistake, and on the 50th minute Yeboah stepped up to provide the match-winning piece of brilliance, a thunderous strike and one of the best volleys that the Premier League has ever seen. It was a goal that was replayed over and over again and is still hailed to this day, a worthy strike to win the August Goal of the Month award if ever there was one.
I've never seen you enthuse so much about a goal, Trevor, to be honest. Well, I was off my chair as well, I have to say. I mean, it's exciting, Des. Whenever he gets the ball, I'm not sure what he's going to do.
A month later, and he scored his second hat-trick for the club against Monaco in the UEFA Cup. It was a trio which showcased all of Yeboah's strengths, his opportunistic athleticism, his tremendous striking power, and his pace and innate striker's instincts. 9 days later, and he was hitting the headlines once again, bagging himself yet another hat-trick, this time against Wimbledon. And his tally that game included another worldie straight from the top drawer, one which was possibly even better than the stunner against Liverpool.
Far though, here's Yeboah. Left foot, right foot, wham bam! He's going to have his own personal goal of the season competition, isn't he?
That wonder goal was once again chosen as the goal of the month, making Yeboah the first ever player to win that award back-to-back until 2013 when Gareth Bale equalled the feat. So good was the strike that it was chosen as goal of the season. It proved to be a controversial decision, and which screamer was better, the one against Liverpool or the one against Wimbledon, is still a matter of hearty debate to this day. Yeboah personally rates the strike against the Reds as his best ever. His 5 league goals in September saw him recognised as the player of the month, as the personal accolades were starting to stack up for Tony Yeboah.
In the 70s, I saw the leagues. I said, they've got fantastic players, and I think maybe I'm one of them.
He was one of Leeds' best players that season, although he did somewhat struggle with consistency that year, managing just 5 further goals in his 15 appearances after the Wimbledon hat-trick. One of these, though, was this corker against Manchester United.
Parker's left it, it's Yeboah. Still got something to do. Tony Yeboah. He's done it.
An injury unfortunately cut his season short in March, barring a start in the League Cup final against Aston Villa, in which Yeboah played through the pain barrier.
There's a match winner, Tony Yeboah. £3.4 million he cost from Eintracht Frankfurt. Scored in both legs of the semi-finals against Birmingham City, and really has a patent on the most spectacular of goals.
Understandably, he wasn't at his best, and Leeds were battered 3-0 in an embarrassing day for the club. Yeboah's injury would keep him sidelined for a total of 8 torturous months. By the time he had regained fitness, the man who had brought him to the club, the man who always motivated him, supported him, and had an undying belief in his goal-scoring abilities, Howard Wilkinson, had been sacked. His replacement, George Graham, did not show anywhere near the same level of warmth to Yeboah, and was giving Jupp Heynckes vibes.
Asking questions, and you go to the office, ask them my salary, hospital, they at least give me the car, and they want to try to tell me my contract is too much.
Graham complained about Yeboah's weight and his performances in training. Despite Yeboah insisting that he was ready to play, Graham mainly left him unused on the bench when he decided to include him at all. Everything came to a head when, in a rare start against Spurs, Yeboah was hooked after 70 minutes for defender Ian Hart, even though Leeds were losing 1-0. The frustrated striker could not stand this provocation and threw his shirt towards Graham as he marched off the pitch.
Howard Wilkerson signed him. George Graham inherited him, if you like. He was injured when George Graham took over. He infuriated George, and quite rightly so, by playing for Ghana in an international match, being injured before he went to play, unfit for Leeds, was fit to play for the national side in Ghana, come back, was injured again and couldn't play for Leeds. And I think it's just a total disenchantment. I think he's just trying to get away. His behaviour is shocking. I mean, the money he's getting, he's a professional footballer.
It was to be the final straw, and news broke to the heartbreak and devastation of the Leeds fans who had come to idolise Tony Yeboah that he was no longer happy at the club and was desperate to leave. So, in the summer of 1997, Yeboah returned to the Bundesliga, joining Hamburg in a €2 million deal. Despite now being in his 30s, Yeboah showed George Graham that he still had what it took to cut it at the highest level and scored 28 Bundesliga goals in 104 league appearances for Hamburg, with his best campaign being the 98-99 season when he bagged himself 14 goals. His stint at Hamburg brought his total up to 96 goals in Germany's top flight, an incredible tally which made him the Bundesliga's highest scoring African player ever, an honour which he held for nearly 20 years until Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang eclipsed him in 2017. Tony Yeboah saw out his career in Qatar with Al Gharafa. Here he won his first and only league title. After hanging up his boots, driven by the desire to give something back to society, he founded his own club, Yeboah FC, but he sold it after 5 years because of corruption in the league. While playing for Frankfurt, Tony had picked up the nickname Yeboah, and it more or less replaced his real name back home in Ghana. The Yeboah name became his brand, and Tony named not only his team after it, but also 2 hotels that he owns in Kumasi and Accra. As he has entered his 50s, Yeboah has become addicted to golf, and so now Yegolfer is the new version. Tony Yeboah's legacy and impact on football is profound. It's not only about his eye-watering highlight reel of unforgettable screamers that he left behind. It's not only that he birthed a whole generation of kids that bellowed Yeboah when they hit a volley on the playground. Being one of the first black players to play in Germany, as well as being the best striker in the league at the time, meant that he helped to change German society and make things just that little bit easier for all the African footballers who followed in his footsteps. In response to some of the awful treatment he had received, alongside Anthony Bafo and Souleymane Sane, Leroy Sané's father, he penned an open letter against racism. One of the most poignant lines from it now adorns a huge wall in Frankfurt, known as the Yeboah House. "We are ashamed for everyone who screams against us." Being the first ever Ghanaian goalscorer in the Premier League inspired the next generation of talent back home the dream of success and showed England that players from Ghana could make an impact. Tony Yeboah walked so that players like Michael Essien, Jordan and Andre Ayew, John Pansel, Jeffrey Schlupp, Suleiman Tare and Asamoah Gyan could run.
Yeboah! Out of this world!